I recently found out that mesh base layers are supposedly better than merino wool or synthetic base layers. Now that's what I call a bold claim, because it goes directly against common outdoors knowledge. If it's true, it could be big. And that's why I ordered one for myself. In this video, I'll do a test to see if they're really that much better than traditional base layers, or are they maybe a bit overhyped.
The fishnet is the first layer.
You're wearing your stripper shirt.
Enter the fishnet base layer.
Mesh base layers were popular roughly half a century ago. Today they're still popular pretty much only in Scandinavian countries. When shopping for mesh base layers, I definitely could see this for myself, because the only legit brand that I could find that still makes them were called THRU-HIKING, which is a Norwegian brand. Also, this video isn't sponsored by them and I purchased it with my own money. The key idea behind a mesh base layer is that you're trapping a lot of air in between the mesh panels. When you're active, the sweat is able to escape to the outer layers without drenching the fabric sitting on your skin. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen with synthetic or merino wool base layers, because the sweat builds up within the fabric and then it sits right on your skin. So when you stop moving, you become cold much quicker because the wet fabric is touching your skin. When you aren't active, for example, when you're taking a break or if you're sitting at your campsite, then there's a lot of trapped air in between the mesh panels. And if you didn't know, most types of insulation are based on trapped air. For example, dawn insulation is so good because the feathers can loft up and keep a lot of trapped air in between them. In traditional base layers, there isn't a lot of air trapped inside the fabric because of the tight weave. And the third and last benefit of mesh base layers is that if they do get wet, they dry much quicker because of all the gaps in the fabric. I'll be comparing my mesh base layer with a synthetic base layer and a merino wool t-shirt, because I don't own a merino wool base layer, but the t-shirt is pretty similar, so I should get very similar results. The first thing that I want to test is to see how sweaty I become while I'm being active. So for this test, I'll be climbing up that hill 3 times wearing each one of these base layers underneath a thin sun hoodie. It's 226 meters of elevation gain spread out over 1 kilometer, and I'll be wearing a 10-kilogram backpack. I usually get pretty sweaty when hiking up that hill, so I think this will be the perfect test. And with the second test, I want to compare how warm I am with each one of them while I'm not being active. So after I climb up the hill with each one of these base layers, I'll take off the sun hoodie, put on a fleece, sit down, start a timer, and wait until I become cold. The one that lasts the longest, theoretically, should be the warmest base layer. Alright, so I'm starting with the synthetic base layer, which I'm wearing underneath the thin sun hoodie. It's currently 5 degrees Celsius outside. Yeah, let's just get this over with. I'm about halfway up and I can definitely feel that I'm starting to sweat a bit. I'm trying to keep up a good pace, going pretty fast because this time I actually want to develop some sweat. I can definitely feel my synthetic base layer soaking up all the sweat. Yeah, I can feel everywhere that the fabric is wet and it's touching my skin. And it isn't really such a bad feeling as long as I'm walking, but I know that as soon as I'm going to stop, I'm going to get cold, which is not good. I just started the timer, and now let's check how sweaty I am. Oh yeah, I'm definitely very sweaty in the armpits. The back is also very sweaty. Putting on the fleece, and then I'm gonna sit over here and wait until I become cold. 10 minutes 40 seconds. I am starting to feel a bit chilly, and at this point I would usually put on my down jacket. 21 minutes and 40 seconds in, I am starting to feel the first shivering, but not a lot. I'm definitely not cold yet, but I'm starting to feel cold. 27 minutes and 43 seconds have passed. And I think this is where I draw the line, because the shivering is starting to become more frequent, and I would say that I'm definitely cold now. My hands have changed the color from red to white, and I'm starting to feel shivering through my spine. So I'm putting on another layer, going down and testing the second base layer. I'm back at the trailhead and I'm eating a bit of food, drinking some water, so that before I start the next test, I'm at roughly the same level of energy, hydration, and warmth. Now I'm starting the second test, which is testing the merino wool base layer. As I said earlier, take this with a grain of salt because this actually isn't a base layer, it's a merino wool t-shirt. But I think the results should be similar. And I've also changed into a fresh and dry sun hoodie on top. Again, I'm at the top, and I've also started the timer. I wonder how many times I say sweat in this video, probably way too much. But yeah, I'm pretty sweaty. Oh yeah, there's definitely some sweat on the back. Putting on the fleece again, and I'm back to sitting and waiting. 13 minutes in, and I'm starting to feel the first shivers. 19 minutes in, and I'm definitely starting to feel cold, but I think I'm not quite at the point where I turned back the previous time, so let's wait a bit more. 22 minutes and 30 seconds in, and I'm calling it quits. It is a bit worse result than previously, but I think you could account this to the fact that I'm wearing a merino wool t-shirt instead of a base layer. I think if I would be wearing a merino wool base layer, I would probably have lasted longer than the synthetic one. Anyway, on to the next one, which is the mesh base layer. I've now eaten a bit, rested, rehydrated, and put on the third and final mesh base layer underneath a completely dry and fresh sun hoodie. The sun isn't setting just yet, but it has hidden behind some of the bigger mountains, so the temperature has started to drop a bit. Right now it's 3 degrees instead of 5, which we started with. Hopefully that doesn't influence the results too much, so I'm just gonna start hiking right now before the temperature drops down even further. Alright, so I made it to the top for the third and final time. I started the timer. And this was definitely the hardest of the 3 climbs because it was the last one. I think I sweated the most. Maybe you can see. Yeah, I can probably tell that I'm pretty sweaty right now. Yeah, so let's change and wait. All right, the armpits, they feel pretty sweaty. The back as well. The back definitely feels pretty wet, but let's put on the fleece and wait and see what happens. I can definitely feel that it is colder compared to the first time when I was here. I would say maybe 3 or 4 degrees colder. So if we reach 27 minutes, which was the result with the first synthetic base layer, then I would say that this would be a win for the mesh base layer, but we'll see. 10 minutes so far. I'm almost 21 minutes in, and I'm only now starting to feel the first shivers. So I can definitely feel that the mesh base layer is working much better compared to the other 2 ones. If I'd have to describe how I'm feeling right now, I would say that there's pretty much not a lot of cold coming in where the base layer is, but obviously I am getting cold in my hands and my head because I'm not wearing any gloves and a hat. 26 minutes so far. And I am starting to feel a bit cold, but I'm definitely not at the point where I was turning back previously. And keep in mind that the temperature now is maybe 3 or 4 degrees lower, so the mesh layer is actually doing a really good job right now. While doing this, I keep checking how's my back, if it's still wet or not. And after 27.5 minutes, which is more than the first synthetic base layer, it's pretty much dry. It has dried out within these 27 minutes, whereas with the synthetic and the merino base layers, it was still wet after all this time. I'm calling it quits at 31 minutes and 9 seconds, which is the longest time, and also the temperature right now is the lowest compared to the first 2 tests. I'm only now starting to feel some cold coming in through the top where the mesh base layer is. But before we continue with the rest of the video, I wanted to talk about my own company called Trail Goals. Together with my wife, we make minimalistic posters of various through hiking trails. If you've completed a through hike or you have a friend who has finished one, then I think this poster will be a perfect gift to remember your adventure. So far, we've covered over 100 different through hiking and regular hiking trails. You can get yours at trailgoals.com. But now let's get back to the video. One thing that I didn't explain at the beginning of this video is that I've actually been testing this mesh base layer for about 1 month now, instead of just this one day. And during this time, I already had noticed that it definitely is warmer compared to my normal base layers. My house isn't heated very well, and if I put it on underneath, I'm pretty much warm all day. On the last hike that I did, which was 1,000 meters of elevation gain in a hot and sunny day, I also noticed that even though I was sweating a lot, the mesh base layer didn't actually feel that wet. Now, when I was touching with my hand, obviously it did feel very wet, but when you're wearing it, it just feels different because there's a lot of gaps in between the mesh panels. If you understand the science behind mesh base layers and how they work, it actually makes a lot of sense why they work much better compared to normal base layers which are with a tight weave. So why isn't this common knowledge in the hiking world? Why did I hear about it for the first time only 2 months ago, even though I would consider myself a pretty experienced hiker? I would personally say that it probably has to do a lot with marketing, because if you're a brand, you want to be innovating with new materials that would push you ahead of your competitors. And in this case, that would be merino wool. But in reality, as you saw in this video, I think we should be more focused on the weave of the base layer itself instead of the material. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in one of my next ones. Bye!